Hello there, welcome to my YouTube channel Saint Nightingale. In this tutorial video, I'm going to be showing you how to cut and sew this 3-part corset with a basque waistline and gathers. Let's go. So first off, like we always do on this channel, I'll place my brown paper on the floor and then take out 1 inch on the sides and upwards, just so that I can work out my pattern in the open space. So what I'm doing now is to mark the shoulder to nipple measurement, which is 10.5 inches, and that's what I've marked on that line. Up next, I'm going to be marking the shoulder to under bust measurement, which is 12.5 inches, and that's what I'm also marking on that line. After marking this, I picked up my long ruler and I labeled UB under bust. After doing this, I'm now going to be marking the waistline measurement, which is 15 inches on that line, and that's what I'm doing as well. I placed my long ruler and I marked that straight line and labeled WL to represent waistline. Alright, so the next thing that I'm going to be doing now is also to mark the hip line, right? That's about 8 inches away from the waistline, because this material is not, the measurement that I'm using is for a smaller person, so that's the hip line there that I've measured HP. So afterwards, I'm going to also measure the full length measurement. The full length measurement I'm working with is 44 inches, shoulder to below the knee, and that's what I marked. Then up next, I'm going to be marking the start line. For me, I'm making use of 7.5 inches for my start line, right? So let's just proceed. And after doing this, I just labeled that SP starting point, and I used my hand to just show you the various measurements. So the next thing I'm going to be doing now is the nipple to nipple measurements, which is 3.5 inches on fold, and that's what I'm marking on that line, right? And with my ruler, I drew the line from that start point downwards, and there you have it. After this, we're just going to be taking out the curve for the under bust area to begin to draft out the corset. So on that part, I took out 1 inch, and on the other side as well, I took out 1 inch, and then I picked my curve ruler to draw out the curve from the nipple point towards the under bust, and I'm going to be doing that for the left side and for the right side. So after this, I picked up my measuring tape again. I marked the 1 inch on both sides of the line where the hip line is, and I took my pencil and ruler to draw that straight line. I'm using that first because we'll be altering the pattern for that side. On that line that you have SP, I took out a quarter and a bit, small measurements, half of a quarter or half of an inch, and I marked that and connected that to the under bust line with my pencil. And I'm also going to take out 4 inches on that part and also connect to the other side of the under bust. But first, that straight line I just drew out now is the shoulder measurement, right? So let me just zoom in so that you can properly see what I'm doing. So I went on that line and I drew my straight line. I went downwards by 1 inch, which is like 1 inch lower than the 7.5 inches that was the start line, and then I took my marker and I connected to that pencil marking that you can see, right? And then from that part as well, I went on that line, I marked 1.5 inches, and which I'm going to be making use of later. Then I went in away from that shoulder line that you had seen there, and I took out 1 inch, and I'm going to be connecting the curve ruler now to that point, that marking that I have just made towards the under bust, right? So that's it, which at the end of the day it's still 4 inches. Then I went to the midpoint and I marked 2 inches upwards, right? And then I went to that point again and marked another 2 inches upward and raised the curve with the curve ruler, as you can see. And then I took my curve ruler and I connected the markings with the ones that I've done on the left side and on the right side, and also the markings that I've done at the midsection on the left and on the right side. And there is a corset cup. So I picked my curve ruler again to elongate or stretch out the curve on that line, and there you have it. So I'm going to be using my marker now to mark this, or rather to label these areas that I called U1 and D1, U2 and D2, so when I'm doing that I can get it correctly. The next thing I did was pick my short ruler to connect the lines from that point to the hip line, and then I shaded. Just follow through the process, you understand. Afterwards I went on to mark the bust measurement as well as the waist measurements. I picked up my measuring tape, added the 2 inches allowance to that, to my bust measurement, and then on the waistline as well added the the allowance to cover up what has been taken out, and then I marked that. Then on the hip line as well, I measured the hip measurement and I drew that line, as you can see on that. So on that point I marked 3 inches, right? Then I went downwards and I marked another 3 inches. As you can see how I placed my measuring tape, just follow me. Then I marked 3 inches on that point, right? And then I picked my measuring tape again. From that line I marked 5 inches. So I went back to that line, I marked that 3 inches, and I picked up my short ruler and connected it to that part that I had marked my initial 3 inches. You see me marking 5 inches now. I put my measuring tape and marked 3 inches on that line, right? So I'm going to pick my short ruler and connect the line from that line, proceeding from the waistline towards the hip line. I'm going to use the short ruler to connect the lines to that point that I marked 3 inches on that side, yes, and I'm going to go downwards again and mark this. But before I go downwards to mark this, let's proceed with other aspects of this design, right? So I flipped the camera so you can better see where the stop line is. On that line, which is the line for the full length measurement, I marked 2 inches. So I'm going to pick up my short, rather long ruler and connect that line, as you can see in the video, downwards to get to that part that I marked 2 inches on, and that's where you have the Basque measurement, the slope that you had seen in the picture that I showed you earlier, right? So we have this now, and because there's a new line now, I'm going to reconnect that line, as you can see, just so that it sits properly on that slope line going from the new hip line that you have seen there. I'm just going to shade off that area so that I won't mistakenly cut that, and I'm going to be cutting through the new line that I've just created. So we're done with this. I'm going to pick up my scissors now and just trim this out. Just follow me to see how I am going to trim this out carefully. So this is what it is. This is what it looks like before I pieces the other parts. I'm going to be using this pattern to cut the back. So still on that line, I'm just going to flip over and ensure that it aligns. I used my sellotape to just pin this down on the fabric, and I'm going to just take out the, from that side, take out the line, the borders that I always create on the outer part of my design. So I'm just going to place this now on that line, the new line that I've created, and just use my scissors to trim out this pattern for the back. Alright, so I'm done trimming out the pattern for the back. I'm going to now zoom in again so you can see this properly. You can see that there are 3 lines. Remember that the front facing pattern that I used had like a border, but when I was placing this I didn't cut it out. That's why we have the extra line. So I'm just going to trim out that excess line and just remove this from this. So what I'm doing now is to create the dart line, which is 3.5 inches as well, making use of the nipple to nipple measurement in front. I picked up my ruler and then I drew a straight line on that 3.5 inches that I've measured from that black line that you can see. And then I picked up my measuring tape and took out the darts allowance on that side, 1 inch on the left and 1 inch on the right. Picked up my short ruler, connected from the start line downwards, and then as well as from the waistline to the hip line, and then I did the same thing again from that part to that pattern. There you have it. So I'm going to be using my scissors to trace out the parts that I won't be needing. I've shaded the area that I'm cutting out. I'm also like drawing a spiral line on that part, so you know that I'm not using that part. That black line, the space between the black line and the blue line is 1 inch, and the blue line to the black line is another 1 inch, which would give us the 2 inches zip allowance that I have created on that part. So I'm going to pick up my scissors as well to trim out the other part after labeling. So I'm going to call that B1 and the other side B2. So let's trim this out carefully. Alright, so there you have it. The panel for the back is ready, and let's proceed to cutting out the panel for the front side. So you can see this on a close-up range. I'm just using my tape to just tape this down so it doesn't shift from the floor. You can see the details now on the bust area, so follow me as I cut through this. So first of all, I'm going to be using my scissors to trim out the borderline that I had created when I started this pattern, which is not, I don't need this part. I just created that pattern, or that banner, or rather barrier on that side. So I picked up my scissors again to trim out. Notice that I followed the new line that I created, right? So I'm just going to cut straight that way. Cut out the cup, the first part of the cup, and then label that F1. Then I'm going to take my scissors again and cut through that line. You can see I cut through the new line, follow through this place, and then cut out the cup so that I can get my F2 out of the way, and that will be labeled F2. So after doing this, now we're going to now cut out the cups properly. The part labeled U1, D1, U2, and D2. So follow me and see how I cut through. Remember that there are two lines. The one down is the nipple line. The one up is the one that the fresh one that I created, and that's what you're going to cut through. The same thing on the lower side. Remember, that's what you're cutting through, and that's it. You could also use a pencil so you don't get confused, to just label the part that you will not be cutting, and use your marker to label the part that you'll be cutting when you're doing this process of going through this pattern. So I placed this U1 and U2 on a new fresh brown paper, pinned this down with bobbin pin for the U1 and the U2, and I ensure that this was placed correctly on a straight line at the upper part. I'm going to be doing the same thing, and this is what I'm going to be cutting out freshly for the upper part of this corset, or the third part of this corset. So I carefully used my pin to pin this down. Just follow me to understand what I'm doing at the end of the day, so that you can replicate this as well. So I placed this carefully, and then I used my pin to pin this down to cut out the pattern for the third part corset. And there you have it. So let's pick up the scissors now and trim this out. Alright, so the pattern is ready. I'm just going to be labeling this R for the right side, so that when I'm trying to flip this over, it's easy for me to recreate this pattern for the left side, and I know which part to flip to the inside out. So I've labeled that R. and I'm going to be replicating this on the rest of the fabric. So let me quickly show you what the pattern turned out to look like. You can see the panel for the front, and you can also see the panel for the back. You can see the labelings F1, F2, R, which is the right side of this cup, D1, D2. You can see B1 and B2 as well. I'm going to be placing this on the fabric now to cut. When cutting as well, you're going to, especially for the areas where you didn't add allowance, you're going to be giving about half an inch sewing allowance, so that when you join together it's still accurate, right? Especially for the D1, D2 and R1 side, you're going to be leaving 1 inch sewing allowance on the exterior. For the F1 and F2 as well, you're going to be leaving half an inch sewing allowance when cutting through. I'm just zooming in this so you can properly see this. You can see the line that I mentioned, which was a fresh one that was created on that part. I'm going to zoom out now so you see the full length and all of that. The sewing allowance for the zip, which is 2 inches on that part, and I'm going to move upwards as well so you can see the dot line and all. So we're done with this now. Let's just proceed to placing this on the fabric and cut. I'm going to be showing you what this looks like after cutting. Like I mentioned, you see the half inch sewing allowance all over this fabric, and that's what I meant by ensuring that I leave about half an inch sewing allowance so that the measurement is as accurate. The allowance that I used for the tip, which is 1 inch, so that when I turn in by half an inch it just flows. So what I'm doing now is to join the F1 and F2 together, as well as the B1 and B2 together for the material as well as for the lining. So for this pattern, I just made use of the fabric alone, and the lining we call aba lining here in Nigeria is what I used. I did not put any interfacing or anything to make the cup area hard or textured. You can decide to do that for yourself. You could use a cupped corset, you could put the wording to make it firm, you could put the ST, but I decided to use just the material to achieve this, and that's because the style in question, it was just the boobs sitting in the cup, and there was no additional material used to make the corset. It was just the fabric, and that's why I decided to employ that. But the different methods that you can use, you can decide to pat this or just leave it as it is, so that the boobs can just sit in naturally like that, more like you making a milkmaid dress, right? The breast just sits into the cup. So let's proceed to joining all the bits and pieces of this. Right now I've joined the material, I'm joining the lining now, and I'm now going to be placing the lining on top of the fabric to sew the top first. After sewing the top, I'm going to iron, flip over and join it. Just follow me, you understand what I'm doing. So you can see that I flipped this over, the first one, right? So let's place the strap for the sleeves now into this fabric, right? So the strap measurement that I worked with is 14 inches, bearing in mind the sewing allowance, half an inch sewing allowance, 15 inches long. I'm placing it very close to the half an inch away from that tip, so that it sits properly on the shoulder. As seen in the picture, was very close to the shoulder blades, and that's why I've done that. So that's that about that. We've joined the upper part of the lining with the fabric itself. So now I've sewn the upper part of the cup. You can see that, right? It's just the fabric. So I'm going to be sewing this down, front facing, right? I'm going to be sewing this across, so I can secure the lining with the fabric itself. Also, because when I sew this on the fabric at the end of the day, I'm going to be closing this area on the fabric with a bias. If you can remember the style that I showed you at the beginning, it had like a sewing in front after the cup, and that's why I'm doing this kind of finishing. I didn't sew the first cup with the fabric and the lining with the fabric, rather I sewed this together first before placing on the fabric. Follow through the video, you would see why I'm doing this and how this turned out to be. Once this is done, I'm just going to pick up my scissors to trim out the excess from the lining. I've trimmed that out now, so I'm going to be placing the cups on the corresponding holes on the fabric, or openings on the fabric, and let's quickly just join this together. So I'm picking the other side as well to also join downwards to align with the dot line as well. So that's completed now. I'm going to be using the bias now to conceal that. You can see as I place the bias on the fabric, so I'm going to place it on that part first, like I'm using that to cover up that. So the first sewing is me placing the bias, sewing this on that part. Ensure that when you're sewing also it doesn't sew on the lining or sew outside of the jurisdiction that you want it to cover up. So I've done the first part now, just do the second part as well. Also, when you're doing this, you can see that I left about half an inch measurement from the bias, which is what after doing this, I'm going to now tuck in into the hole and then sew through. That's done now, and what I'm doing now is to trim out the excess so that when I turn the bias back in, it conceals every opening or excess material showing on the bust area or the cup area. So I'm done with that now. I'm now going to flip over to the front and sew down. Just look at me, follow closely to see how I will be doing this, right? So let's do this. I'm going to be zooming in so you see it properly. You can see that the bias has been turned inwards, so I'm going to be sewing on the front part carefully so that this is as neat as possible, and that's what I'm doing. I'm also stretching out the fabric carefully so it doesn't jump or sew outside of where I want it to go. I'm using the half an inch sewing allowance to achieve this, also ensuring that whatever I'm sewing in front is also sitting properly on the bias inwards. So I'm going to be doing this for the left and for the right side as well. I cut the thread and I'm going to just go to the other side as well to do the same process. Repeat the same process. So I'm going to zoom in a bit more closely now so that you can see this properly. So you can see me opening up the fabric and ensuring that the bias underneath is also sitting very properly. And there you have it. So we're done with this now. The next thing for us is to join the front part with the back part. I'm going to be making use of the inner closing method, which is why I picked up my measuring tape to just get the allowance that I'll be taking out of this so that it guides me as to how many inches I'm going to be taking away to join the front and the back. And that's what I'm doing now. So it will be the front to the front and the lining to the lining. But first off, let's join the strap for the back to the main fabric as well. What I'm doing is to mark the shoulder measurement, which is where the strap will be sitting, bearing in mind the sewing allowance for the zip area. So I've placed the strap now on that part. I'm just going to be covering up with the lining as well in this video. So after joining the strap, like I earlier mentioned, I'm joining the sides, the material to the material and the lining to the lining to flip over and then join the other side as well. While also doing this, I'm also going to join the parts for the zip area so that that part is also concealed as well. So I just cut the excess out to avoid bulge when I flip this in, and there you have it. So let's close up that part. I'm tucking in the excess back into the fabric, and I will just sew down, tucking in the excess into that yes, and I will just sew down and close up. So after this, I'm going to be sewing down. I tried at first using the underbust wire, but it wasn't okay for me, so I removed it and I didn't use it again. So let's just join this now, the lining to the fabric, before we join the part that has the gathers to it. So first of all, I spread open this and made sure that the edges align, and I'm going to be sewing down, as you can see what I'm doing in this video. So I'm sewing this down all the way to the tip, and I'm going to be doing the same for the other side so it properly aligns, right? So I'm going to be placing the machine on that part, and I'm going to be joining as well to sit properly with the lining, and I'm going to sew all the way downwards. After doing that as well, I'll go to the other part or the final part, and then replicate the same procedure till I achieve what I intend to achieve with this. So I flipped over and I'm going to just sew all the way down. So the next thing is to join or close the tip. Or like I mentioned, I left 1 inch sewing allowance for this. So flipping over, that's half an inch sewing allowance to give me my 1 inch sewing allowance. So I'm closing the tip of this fabric now, and I'm also going to be closing the tip of the material that I'll be using for the gathers on the side, which is what I'm doing now. The measurements I'm working with is 34 inches into 2, so 34 divided by 2 will give us, or rather the measurements I worked with is 68 inches, so 68 divided by 2 will give us 34 inches, and that's what I made use of for the gathers on the right side. How did I arrive at this? So that's about 12 inches was the width of that area. So 12 times 2 will give us 24. I added about 10 inches extra to the 24 to give us 34, and that's how I arrived at the gathers measurement. I also didn't want it to be too chunky, which is why I made use of 34 inches instead. So it doesn't break the needle and becomes too thick for the machine. So I'm also going to be using my scissors to notch the center point of this, and before I start joining on the fabric. So now let's begin joining the material for the gathers on the side. And like I mentioned, I'm going to be joining that way. Just follow me, you understand what I'm doing. So the edge is where I started with, and I started pleating, also bearing in mind the middle part that I have notched so that I know where the center part stops, and the measurements or the gathers is pleated adequately across the opening that you can see. So I've gotten to the edge now. I will just now be sewing on a straight line to connect the straight line all the way to the tip, and we're done with that part. So let's go to the other side as well, and then just sew this down, and that's what I'm doing now. So quickly, let's just sew this down. I'm going to be replicating the same thing also for the other side as well, so that the gather sits properly. So we're done with this side. Let's do the same thing for the other side. So starting with that point, I placed the material again on that side, and I sewed on the straight line till I got to the part that will require me to start pleating, and I began pleating the fabric, bearing in mind the center notch that I'd also done as well to meet up with the midpoint as well of this opening for the gathers. And that's just it. So I'll sew through down, and then after this, join the invisible zip on the sides, and we'll almost be done with this process. So this is it. I'm just measuring the allowance, be sure that yes, I'm taking out 1.5 inch on the sides, and I've done that. The full length for the zipper area, I made use of 15 inches. From that part downwards, I took out 1.5 inches and then just closed that part. After this, I'm going to be picking up the invisible zip, and I'm going to be placing the invisible zip on this opening. First off, I ironed out the invisible zip so it flattens out, so that it's easy for me to sew this on the fabric. So 1.5 inches away from that, and then we're sewing this downwards. So let's begin sewing this downwards. So I'm done now. This is what the back view looks like. I'm going to be putting the hook and line you can just see me opening up now. I'm going to be sewing this on that part, so after zipping we can just hook it up and make that side firm. So let's quickly just do that. I'm done sewing. This is what it looks like. Let me flip this over so you can also see what this looks like. I'm going to iron this out and place on the mannequin so you see. So let's start with the back view, and voila, this is what we have. The dress is sitting very pretty. Let's move closer rather, and see how this turned out to be. You can see the dot line, you can see the invisible zip, you can see the strap as well. Let's go to the front so that we can see what this looks like as well. Alright, this is the front view, and this is what the front view looks like. I'm going to iron this out as well so that this sits very pretty. I eventually will wear this and post in the community tab so that you can see how this turned out to look like. I hope this video was as educative as possible. If you have any questions for me, you can leave them down below in the comment section and I'll be taking your questions. Thank you for watching, and like I always say, keep creating magic. From me to you, it's bye bye.